Rising food prices, especially meat, growing population and environmental concerns are causing many people to ask the question, what alternative food sources are there available to us? We'll discuss some of them and ask you if you would consider eating them in this episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello and welcome, especially if you're a new listener to the podcast. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And together with nearly 50 years of teaching experience between us, Reza and I are going to help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm fine, Craig. I'm fine. We're recording this in November, and I've noticed the temperature drop a bit, so I'm fine, but it's a bit nippy, isn't it?
It's a bit nippy, a bit chilly, a bit cold. Yeah, I'm feeling hungry. I really feel like eating some chocolate-covered spiders today. What do you think?
Chocolate-covered spiders, a new food source.
A new food source. As long as it's covered in chocolate, I'll eat it. But before we start with the main focus of today's episode, new food sources, let's look at an email we've received from a good friend of the show, Pilar from France, who referred to a recent episode in which we spoke about dealing with stress. Reza, could you read it for us?
Yes, Pilar from France writes, Hi, I just listened to your last podcast about stress. And I thought about one thing. We say, si tienes solución, ¿por qué te preocupas? Y si no tienes solución, ¿por qué te preocupas? I don't know if you say something similar in English.
What do we say in English for something that translates from that? Maybe don't worry about things you have no control over, which is very, very true. We spoke about that in episode 339 when we spoke about stress and how to deal with it. So go to inglespodcast.com/339 to listen to that episode. There's another saying I remember from years ago, and it's worry is like a rocking chair. A rocking chair is something that goes backwards and forwards. You sit in it, and often when you're old and you go back and forwards, a rocking chair. Worry is like a rocking chair. It keeps you busy, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And I like that because worrying doesn't help anything.
I like that a lot, yeah. I think that really sums it up.
And have you heard the Serenity Prayer?
No, I haven't.
The Serenity Prayer, written by Reinhold Niebuhr, who was an American theologian. It says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Wisdom is sabio. So serenity is the state of being calm, peaceful, and untroubled. And I like that very much because if you can't change the situation, just be serene, just be calm. Don't worry about it.
They're definitely words of wisdom, for sure. Let's hear some more words of wisdom from one of you, from one of our listeners. You've got a lot of words of wisdom. We got a voice message all the way from Ecuador, from the middle of the earth, and it's Johanna.
Hello, Reza and Craig. I am Joanna. I am sending this voice message from the middle of the world. I am a new listener of your podcast. I usually listen to you while I'm commuting, and I can say that I'm very happy that I'm using this time on improving my language skills. I would like to congratulate you for the awesome job. You are very helpful to all of us that are trying to learn new idioms or improving or just remembering things that we have learned on the past. On the other hand, I would like to suggest a topic for a future podcast. I work in the food industry and I do research and development, and probably something very important nowadays is the investigation around new food sources. Probably you can talk about plant-based food or new protein sources, for example, insects, seaweed. Maybe it's very interesting for everyone to know about the things that the investigation is doing now. That's all from my side, guys. Thanks for everything and have an awesome day. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for your lovely message and for giving us the idea for this week's podcast. Beautiful accent. Your accent, Joanna, sounded quite American to me, which is not surprising because Ecuador's closer to the US than it is to Europe. And obviously you used awesome a couple of times. Awesome job, etc. And an awesome day. So thank you very much for your compliments.
And Joanna, I misquoted you slightly presenting this extract. I said that you were from the middle of the earth, but you didn't say those words. I just realized now you say the middle of the world. So slight correction. Yep, that's why they call it Ecuador, the middle of the world.
One or two small things that we can help you with. You used the word investigation, which we tend to connect with a police investigation, for example. And I think a better word in that context is research, which translates to the Spanish word investigación. Remember that research is an uncountable noun. So you do research, you do some research. You do not use the article a or a. So you never say a research, just some research or research.
Yes, I just want to also comment on your accent and repeat what Craig said. You sound American. And when I say that, I mean you sound like a native speaker from America. That's how good your accent is. There are times when maybe I could tell you're a foreigner, but other times you sound like a citizen of the USA. Really good accent, really good pronunciation.
There's one more thing, Joanna. You use the expression on the other hand, which we tend to use when we're giving something that's contrary to what we said before, as a contrast. So on one hand, I don't drink a lot of tea, but on the other hand, I do drink a lot of coffee. So it's a contrary thing. Perhaps a better expression when you're adding another point could be also, or additionally, or another thing is. So you're adding something to what you're saying. You're not expressing a contrary opinion.
But all in all, what a fantastic voice message. Keep it up, Joanna.
And thanks for the idea. We have spoken about food in particular with our friend Agda back in episode 274. She came on the podcast to help us explain vegan and vegetarian food because Agda is a vegan. And go back to inglespodcast.com/274 if you'd like to hear that conversation with the three of us.
Yes, I'm not sure a vegan like Agada would go in for, that means to like, would go in for Craig's chocolate spiders. And perhaps the chocolate without the spider for the vegans.
I hate spiders, so that was a joke. I don't think I'd eat spiders, whatever they were covered with. But let's stay with insects because in the sphere or in the world of new food sources, insects, to give them a better group name, are called mini livestock. And livestock is a global term, an umbrella term we'd use for animals that we eat. For example, cows and pigs and sheep. So small mini livestock would be insects. Would you eat them, Reza?
I would. Right now, I'm not crazy about the idea, but I've got a fairly strong stomach. That means it takes a lot for me to feel sick or to refuse to eat anything. I would give them a go.
You'd try them, yeah?
I'd try them.
You'd try them. I would if they were disguised and I wasn't looking at an insect. So if it were inside something or finely chopped in very, very, very small pieces, maybe, yeah, I would try it in a hamburger, perhaps, that wasn't with ham, but with insects.
I mean, it was pointed out to me once, and it really got me thinking that something that I really like, and many Spanish people like, and many people around the world, but in Spain, very popular dish is gambas. And langostino, all that type of thing. Mm-hmm. There's various types of prawn, shrimp, etc. What is it? It's basically a locust in the sea.
Yeah,
It's
A
like
locust,
a
yeah.
locust. The locust is the land. I think in Spain it's the same word, isn't it? It's langosta.
It is. And I was surprised to see that because locust, for me, lives on land. You find them in Africa. They tend to swarm in huge numbers. They come together in huge numbers and swarm, SWARM, over crops, cosechas, and they eat the crops in the field. I would not think that that same word will be used for a locust that we use for seafood.
But think about it. Yeah, I mean, think of the image in your mind. Yeah, they're very similar. Their physical makeup is virtually identical. One of them we think of as something fantastic for a mariscada, a seafood platter. And the other we think, a locust.
Horrible. Similar insects that are becoming popular with mini livestock include caterpillars, oruga, which is the Spanish translation of caterpillar. I thought oruga was wrinkles in your face.
No, that's aruga.
Ah, aruga.
Letter A, aruga.
Okay, I've learned a new word today, so constantly learning. And grasshoppers, saltamontes, are also very popular in Africa. And in Japan, they really like to eat wasps, avispas.
Japan and in Thailand as well, I know.
Mm-hmm. Any other insects popular in Thailand?
Crickets are also popular in Thailand. That's grillo. Cricket can be a sport, but that's not the meaning here. It's grillo, cricket. I guess they're called cricket in English. I think it's because they kind of make a sound a bit like cricket, cricket, cricket. That's why they're called cricket.
Could be, yeah. So all those insects are becoming very popular in some parts of the world. In fact, there are an estimated 1,400 species of insects that you can eat. And the word we use for things that you can eat is edible. Edible. So those insects are edible. Locusts, caterpillars, grasshoppers are all edible insects.
Actually, another edible one, though I don't recommend it and I don't think many doctors would or nutritionists, but in some African countries, from time to time, they eat cockroaches.
I've seen cockroaches barbecued for sale in China.
China as well.
They are full of protein. Obviously, these insects have a lot of protein. So, yeah, I've seen them. I would not eat a cockroach.
See, my problem with a thing like a cockroach would be that, sure, it's going to have protein. I don't doubt it. But we all know cockroaches will go anywhere. You know, the deepest, dirtiest, most unpleasant sewer, that's SEWER, where the dirty water goes underground, they're happy enough there. Am I going to eat an insect that's been there? No.
But you enjoy bacon, and pigs eat rubbish, and they're very dirty animals, pigs.
Well, yeah, okay, but they're not in the same league as cockroaches. Cockroaches are just vile.
So 1,400 species of insects are edible, and apparently around 2 billion, that's billion with a B, 2 billion people are already eating insects on a daily basis in the world. And that fact amazed me that so many people are eating insects as part of their diet already.
Craig, would you eat an energy bar or another similar snack that contained edible worms or gusanos, or other bugs or bichos?
I think if I'm hungry enough, I'd eat anything. And I've been lucky enough never to be that hungry. But I think if I hadn't eaten for a week or 10 days, yeah, I'd eat anything. What about you?
Yeah, if I really had to, I would. And I bet actually anybody would if they really, really had to. If you were like on the point of dying from starvation, I bet you would eat anything.
To make some of these insects more appetizing and more attractive, we have put a link in the show notes to some edible insect recipes. So if you like cooking and you see some insects in your flat, in your house, you might be interested in looking at this link to see what you can do with your insects. You can find the link to the recipes at inglespodcast.com/341.
Meat is being grown in laboratories. Yes, I'll say that again. Meat is being grown in laboratories.
Wait a second, you can't grow meat, can you? You can grow plants.
You can these days. It's grown from animal stem cells. Stem cells. Do you know how to say that in Spanish?
Célula. Help me.
Yeah, it's a one that you either know it or you don't. Célula madre.
Célula madre.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've heard many a Spanish person say the mother cell. It's not in English. It's stem cell.
Because the stem of a plant is the bottom of the plant. So it's not the flower and it's not the root, which is in the ground. It's the piece of the plant that's from the root to the flower. That's the stem of the flower or the plant.
So that's why we say in English stem cell for célula madre, because it's like the basis where everything grows from. They're using stem cells to grow meat in laboratories, and it can be made into different shapes.
Is it expensive to buy?
Well, the first lab-grown in a laboratory, the first lab-grown burger cost, ready for this, $325,000.
For a hamburger?
That must have been one hell of a whopper.
That's a big Mac.
But that was a while ago now. Of course, as the technology advances, costs reduce. So they calculate that soon they'll be around $10 each.
Okay, well, I would try that. Would you eat grown meat in a laboratory?
Not if I could avoid it, no. Mm-hmm. No, it's not something I would try.
Not your cup of tea. There's something that maybe you can explain to me because you've got more of an interest in this than I do. But there's something called, is it hem or heme, which is used to make plant-based meat. So meat using something that's in plants. And apparently it's from the root of the soy plant, the soybean plant. And apparently also it tastes very much like meat. So I don't really know what this hem or heme is, but they use it to make the plant-based meat. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard of it once or twice, but I know virtually nothing about it. But I think it's pronounced heme.
Heme?
I think so. And you know the word hemoglobin?
Yes.
It's the heme from hemoglobin. So when I think of hemoglobin, I think of red blood cells.
Me too.
So heme, it gives iron. It's full of iron. So when you think of meat, you think of iron. This thing which is either has or helps iron to multiply is the basis for a lot of these soy-based meats. That's all I know about it, to be honest. But I bet it's something to look out for in the future. We'll be hearing a lot more about it, I'm sure.
That sounds like something I'd try as well. I mean, if it tastes like meat, I'd definitely try it, and I have no problem eating plants. I think plants are a wonderful source of all kinds of good things. One thing I do like very much and have eaten many times is seaweed, algas.
Me too. I love seaweed.
I love seaweed. It's been a staple in the diet of Asian countries for a long time. If something is a staple in your diet, S-T-A-P-L-E, it's a permanent thing. It often appears in your diet and it's like a basis of what you eat. So seaweed is a staple in Asia. It grows really quickly and you can use it to replace salt in food like bread and other processed food. It has essential amino acids and other nutrients.
Did you know it's a traditional snack in Ireland?
I did not. Is that with the Guinness? You like as a
You could have it with Guinness or a cup of tea or water. It's a thing which is probably not so well known amongst younger people, but the word dulse, or some people say dulles, I guess it's an old Irish word, is basically dried seaweed, which you can snack on. And you still occasionally see it sold at fairs and things like this in like a plastic bag of dulse. And it's very salty, but incredibly good for you.
Yeah, and I've seen it a couple of times in bars because it's salty. It's really good to eat with beer and a lot healthier than salted peanuts, for example. It's not so fattening. It's better for you.
Craig, another thing which you hear a lot about these days as a very healthy thing to eat among certain circles is Spirulina. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. I've never heard of that.
That's another word to watch out for, like heme. In fact, this spirulina, although it's only recently become kind of extensively used, it's one of the oldest forms of life on Earth.
Really?
Yeah, it's a microorganism which has existed for millions and millions and millions of years. But these days, they've tapped into, that means they've found out about a useful source. They've tapped into its use as a dietary supplement. It's microalgae. Algae is the plural of algae. And it's full of protein, vitamins, minerals, and low in sugar and all the bad stuff. So it's basically a win-win. It can't really do you any harm. It can only do you good. So it's a thing to watch out for the future. Spirulina.
Spirulina. I'll keep an eye open for that. I'll keep my eyes open. Kamut, I think is the pronunciation. K-A-M-U-T. Kamut wheat. Trigo. Is slowly increasing in popularity as well. And that's another thing I haven't heard of. Where does that come from, Kamut?
Oh, I'm surprised you haven't heard of Kamut.
Is it Kamut or Kamut?
I say Kamut. Kamut, yeah. The stress on the second. Although a lot of people are saying it the wrong way because they don't really know the word.
It's a new word.
It is properly. Well, it's not a new word. It's a new word for us, but it's a very, very ancient word. It's an ancient Egyptian word, in fact, from the pre-Arabic period. So the ancient Egyptians used the word Kamut to say wheat.
So I wonder where it's been all these years, if the Egyptians knew about it and only now we're starting to eat it and hear about it. I wonder where it's been all this time.
It never completely disappeared. In some countries, it was eaten. People did know about it, and they called it Kamut, but it just wasn't very popular in the Western world. The West or the Western world is Occidente. But actually, incredibly, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. There's kind of an ironic side to this. It's now a trademark brand. So an ancient Egyptian word. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. You know, the pharaohs, Nefertiti, people like that were saying it. It's now a trademark brand because it was patented. That means given copyright status in America, the USA, in 1990. So it existed before that, and it's because a couple of American scientists took an interest and researched into it, and nobody else had heard of it. They got to patent it, this ancient Egyptian word, in the USA. Really, it should be called Khorasan wheat. Now, that's a word that isn't popular at all. Not many people will have heard of that. So people know the word Kamut more, which is actually now a trademark word, but the generic is Khorasan. Khorasan's a type of wheat, and Kamut, I guess, is a subspecies of Khorasan. And why has it become popular? I mean, wheat's wheat. It has gluten, right? You hear a lot of people talking about gluten-free diets, trying to avoid gluten. Kamut does have gluten, but much less than the traditional wheat.
So it's easier to digest.
That's the reason why. Much, much easier, much less fat, much more protein, far less sugar, more of the good stuff, less of the bad stuff. Kamut.
I'll keep an eye open for that as well. There are many other sources of food which have only recently been discovered by the mass market, and they're interesting to look at. We don't have time to mention all of them here. We just mentioned one or two, but some of the others include the grains spelt wheat. That's S-P-E-L-T, spelt wheat.
Craig just spelt?
I just spelt. Chia seeds, C-H-I-A, chia seeds, and amaranth, which is amaranto. Is that the same thing that's in amaretto, the liqueur from Italy?
No connection at all, no.
Okay.
This is an ancient grain, which is becoming popular again. Spelt as well. You probably did hear of spelt growing up. As a child, you would have heard of spelt.
I've seen that word before.
Not as popular as it is now, but it never disappeared. It did exist 50, 60, 70 years ago. It just wasn't as popular. So these things are making a comeback. Strangely, a lot of the kind of food sources of the future are actually very old things which have been rediscovered.
Going back to nature, perhaps. Something that's definitely not going back to nature is 3D printed food. Yes, you can actually print food on a 3D printer. And this really amazed me because I had no idea. You buy a special 3D food printer and you buy special cartridges, but not with ink.
What's in the cartridges?
Food. Different types of food. So you'd have a wheat cartridge, for example, or a sugar cartridge or a salt cartridge. So you buy these different food cartridges and then you can make food. So you can print it. You can say, hey, Reza, can you print me a sandwich, please? And you can print me a ham sandwich.
I wonder, would some very well-known printer companies that, of course, I can't mention in the program that used to really annoy me, I wonder, will they get up to their old tricks? So you want to print out a loaf of bread, and it says, sorry, we can't print you a loaf of bread because you've run out of chocolate. But I only want to print a loaf of bread. Sorry, you have to have all of them. You need the chocolate, the salt, and the wheat, so we can't print you a loaf of bread. I won't name any companies who used to do that, remember?
Yes, I do. And can you imagine if we wanted to print some chocolate biscuits and they knew how much I love chocolate? All the other cartridges would be really cheap. But for me, on Google, to buy chocolate cartridge would cost me 6 or 7 or 10 times as much money. I can imagine that happening.
And you just know there's going to be generics and copies as well. So you buy extra quality dark Swiss chocolate cartridge, but actually they've given you a crappy one from some country that you don't know the origin, and it's 5% cocoa if you're lucky.
Yeah, but an interesting idea though, because we could say, okay, after we recorded this podcast, we can print some chocolate biscuits. It'll be nice.
Oh, that would be nice.
You may have heard the expression GMO, GMOs, genetically modified organisms. It's quite a controversial subject these days, and Reza and I don't think are in 100% agreement on whether they're a good thing or not. What do you think, a blessing or a curse? What's your opinion?
A bit of both. A bit of both. Nothing's really ever clear-cut, black and white in this world, is it? The invention of GMOs has the potential to help in many ways. But for me, it's more of a curse than a blessing if I had to choose one. What about for you?
I would agree with you up to a point, although my tendency is to be more a blessing than a curse based on what's happened since the beginning of evolution. We've constantly tried to improve our conditions by, for example, taming wolves to become dogs, and trying to put 2 different kinds of apples together so that it's sweeter and maybe a bit bigger. So we've been crossbreeding for a long time. Crossbreeding is when you mix different strains or different types of fruit or plants or animals to get a better end result. So I think it's the next step. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I think it depends on how it's used by big multinational companies. That's the danger.
Yeah, just in case anybody isn't quite sure what it is, what is GM? It's basically the idea of putting cells or other components that aren't normally in a species into it. That's basically the essence of it.
But are there any pure 100% species these days?
Well, we're all mixtures, and you know, we originally were some type of apes, but it wasn't that somebody just one day in a laboratory stuck a few human cells, into an ape and it changed it. It was a very, very slow process. But the idea of GM is that it's very abruptly and unnaturally, that's the key word for me, unnaturally produced, because natural modification has, as you say, always existed and always will. But it's the idea of doing it so abruptly. I mean, I would say, look, since when did humans know better than Mother Nature? Isn't it best just to leave it to Mother Nature to slowly let these things develop? Doesn't Mother Nature know what's best for the planet? We don't have a great track record. I mean, when we interfere with things, we get results like climate change and greenhouse gases, like when we produce too much toxic atmosphere. It's really generally when we interfere with Mother Nature, it tends to blow up in our faces, don't you think?
Well, but is it natural, for example, if you want to have a child and as a woman, not you, but a woman, a woman knows that if they are short with brown hair and brown eyes and they would like their child to be tall, blonde with blue eyes, if they have a baby with a man who is tall, blonde with blue eyes, that mixture of the genes will probably produce a taller, more blue-eyed, blonder baby. Isn't that the same?
I wouldn't use the word probably.
Possibly. Isn't that the same?
Yes, but it's natural. You see, it's natural engineering, if you like, but naturally done, just not abruptly putting, a bit of a cell from a fish into a plant, which is the type of thing they do. Fish cells aren't supposed to be in plants. If they were, they wouldn't be a fish. They'd be a plant, is the way I look at it. But by the way, as regards the fish, an interesting word to learn is Frankenfish. Had you heard that word before?
I've heard of Frankenstein. Frankenfish, is that fish made from other fish altogether, like a shark's body with a different tail? Or
basically, yes. So in other words, it's a portmanteau word. Remember we did a lesson on portmanteau?
Yes, mixed words like podcast and yeah.
Frankenstein, fish, Frankenfish. So a fish which is made from lots of different bits. It's a genetically modified fish. Just so people know, it isn't just plants. There have been genetically modified animals already. And I think they are already for sale in certain places as edible food. I ask you, is this a good thing or a bad thing? In any sector of the economy, imagine any sector you like, fizzy drinks, wine, bread, TV manufacturers, it really doesn't matter. Is it a good idea that only 4 companies own 60% of the world market? Is that a good idea for the customer? Is that a good idea? Because that is the case when it comes to genetically modified seeds. And if you think, but maybe he's been a bit optimistic, that might grow in the future. Au contraire, my friends, it used to be 6, which is not a lot. It went down to 4 from 6. 6 is appalling already. That 6 companies should be an oligarchy of any industry is appalling. It reduced to 4. It got even worse. That's the real future of GM crops, if you ask me, because those companies will have patented, they've got copyright on their seeds. They're the only people who can produce it, and you have to go to them to get the seeds. Only 4 of them. Very soon they'll be able to charge what they like, and there'll be dire consequences with that.
I agree with you, and I'm against any kind of company monopoly of any aspect of commerce. I mean, we've seen with Google owning search and Amazon.com owning online shopping. It's always bad when there's one or very few companies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that GM crops are bad, and they're definitely not bad for you physically. They're not bad to have in your diet. The problem, I think, is more business and not the crop itself.
I don't accept the finality of what you say, that they're not bad for you. I accept that they might not be bad for you. But like any cautious scientist would say, we need more research. Not enough time has passed, because it's only been about 30 or 40 years, and only really intensively the last 20 years that GM crops have been about. That's not enough time, I think, to determine whether there's a link or not with health. Okay, they can't prove that there is, but it's not enough time yet to prove that there isn't. In my opinion, the jury is out on that still.
Well, you've heard what we think, listeners. We'd very much like to know what you think on GMOs and what your opinion is. But before you send us your feedback and your opinion, we do ask you to watch the 2 videos that we've included in the show notes, because it explains very well, a lot better than we have, I think, what GM crops actually are. Go to inglespodcast.com/341 and you'll see 2 links in the show notes to those 2 videos. One of those videos actually completely shocked me, and I had no idea of this fact, which really has nothing to do with GMOs. I did not know, Reza, that we waste 1/3 of food. Did you notice that in one of the videos? 1/3, 33% of food produced in the world is wasted. So some arguments for GMOs say it might help to solve hunger around the world. That's not the problem. The problem is not enough food. The problem is food distribution. That we're throwing food away in the West and it's not getting to people who are starving in other parts of the world. And that really made me think.
Exactly. I think Craig's coming over to my side a bit. Exactly. That's why I think the whole business of, it will solve world hunger is a red herring. Sorry for the pun. A red herring. Well, a herring's a fish. Un arenque.
Is it a Frankenfish?
It's not a Frankenfish. It's a traditional fish. And they normally aren't red. They're a kind of greyish, bluish colour. They're probably different types, but not red ones. So a red herring doesn't really exist. So it's something that draws your attention in the wrong direction.
It's a fallacy. It's not true.
There's more than enough food for all of us. Craig has just said that. We throw it away. But are we ever going to distribute it so that everybody has some? No. Whether there's GM food or not, that's not going to happen.
Because of business, and that's maybe a subject for another podcast. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. That's the problem. So tell us what you think, and thank you very much, Joanna, for sending in your message. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach us via the SpeakPipe app, which is at SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. Now, if you're walking, if you're driving, if you're running and you're not near a computer, just go to the show notes at inglespodcast.com/341 and you'll find all these links there. But what are our email addresses, Reza?
You could write to us at our email addresses, craig@inglespodcast.com, or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And at the Mansion Ingles website, you can find a store with paid courses. That's at store.mansioningles.net. And recently I mentioned a pronunciation course that we've produced over at Mansion Ingles that Vanessa from Venezuela has been using. And I'd just like to play Vanessa's feedback on the pronunciation course.
Hi Reza, hi Craig. My name is Vanessa Campos. I'm from Venezuela. Currently, I'm living in Quito, Ecuador. I just found your podcast a few weeks ago. I've been listening to them daily. I think right now I'm a hercoholic, as you say. Recently, I took the pronunciation course that you have. I just want to recommend it to all the listeners because I think it's really useful. It has a lot of words that are really complicated for us, and I think you just hit the nail on the head with this course. Thank you guys for all the amazing work that you do. My goal for this year is to improve my fluency, to improve my pronunciation. I think I will do it. Thanks to you. I will contact you soon. Stay safe, guys. Bye.
Thank you very, very much, Vanessa, for that wonderful feedback. And I loved the expression, you hit the nail on the head. As acertado, you hit the nail on the head. Thank you very, very much for that positive feedback.
And thank you to all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast through Patreon. You can see a list of all our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/Ingles podcast. Patreon is spelled Patreon. If you'd like to join the Patreon program for as little as $1 per month plus VAT, if you do that, you get instant access to recent transcriptions. So once again, I'll repeat, patreon.com/English podcast if you're interested.
And we'd like to say hi and thank you to our latest Patreon supporters. Unfortunately, we don't have time to mention everyone on this podcast, but we do appreciate each and every one of you. Recent subscribers include Victor Cristobal, Juanlu Anaya, Maria Jose Ruiz Guzman, Miguel Gonzalez, and Veronica Rodriguez. Thank you very much, all of you. What's next week, Reza?
Next week, Brexit.
It's been a long time coming, so be careful what you've asked for. We're going to speak about Brexit next week, so please join us for that. Thank you very much for listening this week. Until next time, it's goodbye from Reza.
And bye-bye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.